This day and time. What happened today, years ago?
Okay, let's dive in. Today we're digging into some source material you sent over. It's called Three Internal Collapses and Historical Lessons for This Day and Time. Could be an article, maybe a video.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, history often focuses on the big external stuff, right? Battles, invasions.
Right, the usual suspects.
Exactly. But this piece looks at something, well, arguably deeper, when these really powerful societies kind of implode, not conquered, just collapse from the inside out.
Yeah, buckle from within. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
So our goal today is to unpack these examples the source gives us. Look at these specific moments of, I guess, internal failure.
Mm-hmm.
Why did they happen, according to this material? And what can we, actually learn from these ancient cracks for now? Any surprising lessons?
Well, let's get into it and see what the source argues.
So first up, the reading takes us to is Athens, way back, 411 BC. And this is, the Athens, birthplace democracy, all that.
The cradle, yeah. But the context the source paints is key. They just had this absolutely crushing military defeat over in Sicily.
Devastating.
Yeah. So people are tired, the money's gone, and the material suggests their belief in democracy itself was getting shaky, really starting to fray.
And that's the moment, right? The reading says the aristocracy, who, let's be honest, weren't huge democracy fans to begin with, they saw their chance.
They absolutely did. They basically staged a coup, installed this oligarchy rule by the few.
A small group.
Yeah, they called it the government of the 400. Sounds quite formal.
It does. But the reality, according to this account, wasn't formal. It was, harsh. Political terror, silencing opposition. And what's really striking, what the source highlights, is the reaction of the average Athenian. It suggests they were so beaten down, so maybe despairing, that a lot of them just kept quiet.
Or even went along with it. That silence is powerful, isn't it?
It really is.
But the reading draws this really interesting contrast. You've got the Athenian fleet way over at Samos, mostly common citizens, sailors, soldiers.
Not the elites back home.
Not at all. And they completely rejected the coup, just said no.
Wow.
They set up their own democratic council, kind of a government in exile. They even brought back Alcibiades, the controversial general. So they were resisting, but from a distance.
That's fascinating, this idea of the resistance coming from the edges, not the center. And this oligarchy, it didn't actually last long, did it? The source says, 4 months?
Just 4 months, yeah. Then democracy was restored, somehow.
But the lesson the source pulls from this, even from that short time, seems pretty stark.
It is, basically. Democracy doesn't need an external enemy to fall apart. Internal division and, maybe more importantly, people just becoming apathetic or losing the will to fight for it. That can be enough.
Division and apathy. Okay, right, let's shift gears. We're jumping forward now to Rome, 68 AD, and we've got Emperor Nero, last of his dynasty, the Julio-Claudians. Looks like he has absolute power, right?
On the surface, absolutely, but the source lists all these actions that were just, poisoning the well, killing his own mother, Agrippina.
Can't forget that one.
Forcing his old teacher, Seneca, to commit suicide, his paranoia, persecuting nobles he suspected, and then there's the Great Fire of Rome.
Yes, the fiddling story, though that's probably legend. But the source mentions the accusation that he blamed the Christians.
Right, possibly to shift blame from himself.
Yeah.
Whether true or not, the perception was damaging. All this cruelty, the extravagance, the instability, it alienated pretty much everyone, even those closest to him.
Including powerful figures out in the provinces. The material mentions governors like Galba, Vindec, and they start revolting.
Exactly, discontent was boiling over. But the reading says the real nail in the coffin, the critical moment, wasn't just the governors.
No, what was it?
It was his own bodyguards, the Praetorian Guard, the guy's supposed to be loyal protectors.
Your protectors, what happened?
The source suggests they were bribed. Simple as that. They just switched sides, abandoned him.
Wow, betrayed by his own guard.
And once that happened, it was over. The Senate, sensing the shift, declared Nero an enemy of the people.
So he flees.
He flees, yeah, and ends up taking his own life. The source even includes those supposed last words, "What a great artist is dying."
Just incredible arrogance, even at the end.
Right. And his death, it didn't fix things. The reading reminds us it led straight into chaos, the year of 4 emperors.
A bloody civil war.
Brutal. So the lesson here, according to the source, seems pretty clear. Unchecked power breeds corruption, paranoia, alienation. And when people, especially the ones holding the swords right next to you, lose faith in your legitimacy, Well, an entire dynasty can crumble incredibly fast. Belief matters.
Okay, third case. We're moving to France now, 1358. Different time, different place. What's the setup here?
Well, the Hundred Years' War is dragging on. Big problem. The French king, John II, is actually captured by the English. He's a prisoner.
Right, captured at Poitiers, so they need ransom money.
Exactly. Huge sums. So taxes are crippling the ordinary people, the peasants. Meanwhile, the source paints this picture of the nobility living it up, disconnected, and, frankly, failing to protect the realm or its people.
Sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It really does.
Mhm.
And the source identifies the breaking point. This massive peasant uprising called the Jacquerie.
The Jacquerie, where does that name come from?
It apparently comes from Jacques Bondome, which was like a nickname, kind of a derogatory one, that nobles used for peasants, like calling them simple Jack or something.
Patronizing.
Very. And the uprising itself, the way the source describes it, it was intense. Thousands of peasants.
Armed with whatever they had.
Yeah, pitchforks, axes, knives, farm tools, basically. They attacked castles, killed knights. The reading suggests it wasn't just about survival, like we need food. It was a demand for justice.
Like a full-on rejection of the system.
A rejection of that whole noble class they felt was oppressing and failing them.
Was there any organization to it? Or just pure rage?
Well, interestingly, the material points to a leader figure, Guillaume Collet, apparently a reasonably well-off peasant, not destitute. And he managed to get some structure going, leading a force of maybe up to 5,000 people.
So there was some strategy involved.
Seems like it, but it ends badly. Tragically.
How so?
The nobility, they pretended they wanted to negotiate. They invited Cole for talks, a parley.
Uh-oh.
A
There's
trap,
you.
a complete trap. They grabbed him, tortured him horribly, and executed him. Classic betrayal.
Brutal. And the rebels.
Without their leader, they were basically cornered and slaughtered at the Battle of Mello. Crushed. By June 1358, it was over.
So the revolt failed.
In the immediate sense, yes. Utterly crushed in blood.
Right.
But the reading argues it wasn't for nothing. It left this deep scar, this crack in the foundation of French feudalism.
A warning sign, maybe.
Exactly. The lesson drawn here is about the social contract, even if it's unwritten. Stability relies on some sense of fairness between those who rule and those who are ruled. Push people too far with injustice and neglect.
And eventually, they snap.
They erupt, no matter how bloody the cost might be.
So we've got Athens, Rome, France. Three very different places, different times. Powerful societies.
Hugely influential, culturally dominant, vast territories in some cases.
But the common thread the source keeps pointing to is that at these specific moments, they weren't primarily taken down by foreign armies. The fatal blow came from inside.
Yeah, the failure was internal. And if you pull together the root causes identified in this reading,
What do we see?
well, you see deep societal division, that polarization tearing Athens apart. You see corruption and betrayal right at the heart of power, like with Nero and his guard in Rome.
And then that explosion of suppressed rage from below, the Jacquerie in France, born from injustice.
Division, corruption, injustice. Those seem to be the key internal weaknesses highlighted.
And the source is pretty clear, isn't it? These aren't just old stories for the history books.
Not at all. The reading positions them as warnings. Cautionary tales for any time, including ours.
So what's the big takeaway message then?
I think the overarching point the source makes is about fragility. Any system, however strong it seems, is fragile if trust breaks down internally.
Trust seems key.
It does, and linked to that. Peace maintained only by force isn't real peace. Democracy needs active participation, not just apathy. And, well, order built on deep injustice is fundamentally unstable. It can't last.
It really hammers home that this day-in-time idea from the title. History isn't just remembering what happened.
No, it's trying to understand why. Why did these strongholds fall? What were the internal dynamics, the failures of trust, the consequences of letting divisions fester, the price of ignoring injustice?
And maybe by understanding why they crumbled.
Hopefully we get some insight into how to avoid repeating those patterns, how to shore up our own foundations.
It leaves you thinking, doesn't it? Looking at these collapses, Athens and its divisions, Rome and its rot from the top, France and that peasant fury against injustice. What kinds of internal cracks, maybe subtle ones, might we be ignoring in societies today, around the world, or even closer to home?
Mm-hmm. It's a challenging question.
And what role does our own engagement or our lack of it, our silence play? Are we helping to reinforce the foundations, or are we maybe letting them erode? Thinking about these three stories, what's the one detail or lesson that really sticks with you, that maybe feels most relevant or, frankly, worrying right now? Something for all of us to chew on.
Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and ring that bell for more history daily.